Welcome back to the Rayner Report. And, maybe you're watching it for the first time. I need to just say welcome. But we've really built up a good following, a good audience with this video portion of the platform, the Rayner Report. And so for most of you, this is welcome back. You know that I give you about 10 minutes, this snippet of information where I really focus and hone in on one topic. It's always my hope and prayer that this information is not only useful to you, but it's useful to others. Perhaps it's something you view in staff meeting, or perhaps you share it with your board, your elders, your deacons, or maybe even key leaders. A lot of it has to do with church life in general, but a lot of it has to do with pastors specifically. And thus is where we are going today. We're going to talk about stressors on the pastor. And if you're a pastor, you're probably saying, yep, I know where he's going on this. I can probably outline them for you. Well, I've said this before when I talk about the pastor, and I want to say it again to the audience. I hope that if you're an elder, a deacon, a teacher, a lay leader in the church, staff person, that you are viewing these videos not only to help the church, but also to help the pastor lead the church. And if a pastor has any of these 7 stressors, you can be an aid. You can be a resource to help. So let's look at each of these 7 and let's begin to unpack them so that you may be a positive influence. First one of this is give their families the deserved time. So pastors oftentimes feel very guilty about their families. And here's one of the things that happens with pastors. They go through the false exercise of compartmentalization. They say, my family and the church. And so when they choose the family, they're neglecting the church. When they're choosing the church, they're neglecting the family. They compartmentalize it. Well, here's what pastors need to realize. And if you are not a pastor, you can help the pastor realize this. A pastor's first line of ministry in the church is the family. It's not competition, it is priority. And the family is the first line of ministry. The Bible is very clear. 1 Timothy 3:5 says, if a man cannot manage the church and manage his household, how can he expect to manage the church? It's powerful, poignant, and it can be often painful to hear those type of words, because if we're not managing our families, we cannot manage the church. So many pastors feel the stress. Church is taken away from my family time. You need to remind those pastors again and again that when they're doing things for their family, they are giving church time, because that is their first priority, their first line of ministry in the church. Related to this is an unhappy spouse. If a pastor has an unhappy spouse, you can expect that things are going to be tough. That is why I say many times an unhappy spouse will lead to the pastor having to say, I can no longer minister here because I have to minister to my spouse first. It does happen. I can think of examples clearly right now where it has happened, and that decision has to be made. But there are times when the spouse is unhappy for a season or for a specific reason that will pass. The pastor certainly is not exempt from stressors, but neither is the pastor's spouse. And when we get to number 3, you will see why. And so it may be that you need to be ministering not only to the pastor. If you're watching this video, you need to be ministering to the pastor's spouse as well. Many times, spouses are expected to fill unreasonable roles in the church. And we call these twofers. That many churches believe that they will get 2 people for the price of 1. And so they're going to get the spouse to do this and this. The old cliche used to be, do you play the piano? But now it might be, do you lead a ministry? Do you do this or that? The issue that I'm saying here is many of you need to be aware that the pastor's spouse directly relates to the health of the church, because it directly relates to the pastor. Which brings up number 3, the glass house. The glass house is just what it sounds like. Everybody is always watching. How do you get rid of the glass house? You don't. You just don't. I was doing a Church Answers call with a group of pastors recently, and we were going over the thing about PKs, or pastors' kids. And a number of the pastors who were on the call, including 2 of my own sons, were PKs. And what they said is, you never get away from the glass house. You learn to live and to deal with the glass house. And what these PKs said was, if you just make me feel like I'm part of the church, I can handle the rest. If you make church a fun place, a joyous place to be, I can handle the rest. I can handle the glass house, pastor, parent, as long as you are letting me be a normal kid. And the same thing goes for the spouse and others as well. The glass house is reality. You don't do away with it, but you do make the right adjustment. Another stressor on pastors is lacking competency in key areas. I mentioned in a previous Rayner report about my lack of competency in counseling. And because typically there are heavy demands upon pastors to do counseling, if you're like me and you don't have that competency, it can be a stressor on you. How do I know I'm saying the right thing? How do I know I'm guiding in the right direction? How do I know? I mean, pastors are expected to be leaders, psychologists, counselors, financial managers, orators, teachers, conflict managers, human resource professionals, strategists, and the list goes on and on. Pastor, you're neither omnipotent nor omnicompetent, nor are you omnipresent or omniscient. You're not any of those. You're not all-knowing, all-powerful. You're not everywhere. You can't do everything. Do those things that you do well, equip the saints to do the others, and then let it go. A stressor is lacking competence in a key area, and you feel like you have to do it, and you are failing to do it well. Another stressor, number 5, is personal financial needs. This is probably one of my pet peeves for pastors, because many of the pastors' salaries are put forth for the whole church to see, and some are complaining and some are whining about the amount a pastor makes. But here's the reality. Most pastors are grossly underpaid. That's right. You hear about the exceptions to the rule. You hear about the opulent lifestyles of a few. Do not let those examples become normative in your mind, because most pastors could certainly use a lot of help in this area. Another one of my related pet peeves is talking about package, financial package, as if it's a salary. Let me explain. Let's say a pastor has a $50,000 cash income coming to him. Let's say he has $5,000 in retirement, $5,000 in health benefits, and then $5,000 in some type of expense reimbursements, average amount. 15, 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 50, 65,000. Many people will say, we pay our pastor $65,000. No, you don't. You pay your pastor $50,000. That's how the secular world would do it. The pastor has $5,000 in health benefits. The pastor has $5,000 in retirement benefits, and then is reimbursed to the tune of somewhere around $5,000. Keep in mind that oftentimes what we consider the pay for a pastor is not the pay in the secular sense. It's not the cash the pastor receives. It is the package. Be able to differentiate between the two, and make sure that if your pastor has that stress of a personal financial need, that you are an advocate coming along doing everything you can to get the pastor's income to a level that is livable. Responding to criticisms. All pastors will be and are criticized. That's reality. All pastors are hit often with criticism. Pastors are no exception to leadership criticism. The challenge is not that whether or not you'll have criticism. The challenge is how you'll respond to them. And it's not just a matter of thick skin versus thin skin. It's a matter of the heart. It's a matter of the attitude. And it's a matter of expectations. Are you really dealing with criticisms well? This is one of the stressors on pastors. Finally, the 7th stressor is the lack of a confidant. This confidant could be another pastor. It could be a family member that you really feel comfortable sharing things with. It could be a sibling living somewhere else. Pastors need a pastor. Pastors need someone who can be their confidant. Pastors need someone who will not judge them, but listen to them. When pastors don't have confidence, that stress that comes in is not released. It becomes internalized, and that can cause all kinds of problems. I know that this has been kind of a negative Rayner report. I understand that we're talking about stressors, but you as a pastor need to hear them. And even if you're not as a pastor, you need to hear them so that you may be a resource to help your pastors. That's one of the reasons that we do the Rayner Report. And one of the ways we do the Rayner Report is through our sponsor. We thank you for Costco. Costco is a design build firm that's doing an incredible job building churches, remodeling churches. I've got 2 sons right now in churches that are working with Costco, so that says a lot about how I believe in this company. You can reach them at churchdesign.com. Tim Songster is the CEO. You'll absolutely love working with him. He not only knows about church ministry through facility building, he also knows church health, and he's able to tie the two together. Thank you again for joining me on this Rainer Report, and we'll continue to grow healthy churches together.